Those were some photos of a book launch in Kolkata which happened on 12th of November. The book is Americay Anandi by Sangachatta Ghosh. It is in Bengali and arguably one of the first books on antinatalism in Indian languages. We had covered this book in one of the previous ATW episodes. It talks about the life story of Anandi Bai Joshi, who was one of the first female doctors from India. She went to United States to study medicine after death of her first child. She came back after graduation and died of tuberculosis. How exactly is this tied to antinatalism? For that, you'll have to read the book if you know Bengali. Now, on to something darker, like hell. Antinatalism and the Soteriological Problem of Reproduction is a paper by Kevin R. West, published in the Journal of Philosophy and Theology. There are three problems in Christianity. One is the problem of evil, that is, why is there so much evil in the world when there is an all loving and all knowing God who created and controls this world? Then there is a problem of hell. Hell is imagined as a place of eternal suffering. After they die, some people are sent to heaven where it will be eternal bliss, and others are sent to hell. How many people will be sent to heaven and how many will be sent to hell varies depending on who you ask. But it is central to belief of hell that some people would be sent to suffer forever. Now the problem is, why would an all-loving benevolent God create such a place, and why would he send people over there? Why would he not save all people, forgive their sins, and send them to heaven? The third problem is the problem of foreknowledge. That is, if the God is omniscient, he should know what is going to happen in future. And if he does know how people are going to behave in future, why even create those people who would eventually end up in hell? That is where the problem of reproduction comes into picture. Note here that we are talking about God creating people and not about parents creating the child. That is why this is a soteriological problem. But Kevin combines this with the problem of individual reproduction to create a soteriological problem of reproduction. If there is a significant chance that your child will end up in an eternal hell and you have a choice with respect to conceiving the child, then you should not conceive the child. The difference is that God has the foreknowledge of what the life trajectory of the child is going to be and whether the child will end up in hell. But the parent does not know how the child will behave in its life. This argument presents a stronger case than Bennett's asymmetry for theists. Bennett's asymmetry takes pain and pleasure as example of harms and benefits within a given life. And since that life is assumed to be finite, the pain and pleasure in it are also finite. But the case of heaven and hell is about pleasure and pain for infinite amount of time. Any given human life will be some mix of pain and pleasure, and it is one thing to face the troubles of this life for the sake of its pleasures. But it seems qualitatively different to cause one's child to risk an eternity of loss, even for the sake of an eternity of gain. The absolute binary quality of the final outcome, as historically conceived in Christianity, changes the matter inordinately. Kevin is not the first to encounter this problem. Isaac the Syrian, who was a Christian bishop in 7th century, writes that it is not the way of compassionate maker to create rational beings in order to deliver them over mercilessly to unending affliction and punishment for things of which he knew even before they were fashioned, aware how they would turn out when he created them, and whom nonetheless he created. More recently, Zachary Manis, in Sinners in the Presence of a Loving God, imagines a thought experiment. Suppose there's an immaterial soul, and God gives that soul two options. Option 1 is to be born and live a full human life. Option 2 is to be immediately annihilated. If that soul chooses human life, it does not know what kind of life it will lead and what kind of afterlife it will have, whether it will be saved and go to heaven or whether it will be damned and go to hell. Zachary says the rational option for the soul is to get annihilated. Without knowing anything about the details of the life that would be lived, or the post-mortem end result, including the likelihood that that end result would be salvation rather than damnation, might not an ideally rational soul choose annihilation? Now, you could argue that the soul should evaluate the probabilities of going to hell versus going to heaven, but Zachary says that doesn't really matter. Imagine a game of Russian roulette with a 20-round revolver, a bullet in only one chamber, and a large monetary payoff if one survives. The fact that the odds are in one's favor does not change the matter. taking the bet is still reckless at best, and most would consider it the height of foolishness. So the odds don't matter, and one has to be absolutely certain about not going to hell. If one believes that hell is a reality, and yet one cannot be absolutely certain that that hell is not one's own fate, then it becomes rational to wish that one had never lived. Kenneth Hima has a different point of view. Here we need to know what Christian exclusivism is. It is the belief that Jesus Christ is the only way to salvation and that other religions do not offer the same path to God. And given that large parts of the world follow other religions, the odds of large populations going to hell are very high. It is morally impermissible to bring a new child into the world when there is a sufficiently high probability when doing so will create a substantial risk that the child will invariably suffer severe harm as a direct consequence of being born. Eternal hell constitutes severe harm, and from the fact that only 1/3 of the world is even nominally Christian, that strong Christian exclusivism implies that at least 2/3 of the world's population will end up in hell. If both a traditional hell and Christian exclusivism obtain, then it is intuitively wrong and gravely so to bring a child into this world facing such high odds of a terrible fate. You may argue that the eternal salvation or damnation depends on what the child does in its life. So it is the child who is responsible for its fate, and we can't put the blame on its parents. Well, the parent may not be ultimately responsible for the child's decision and thus the child's fate, but the parent does seem to be responsible for putting the child in the position of being constrained to choose. In That All Shall Be Saved, Heaven, Hell, and Universal Salvation, David Bentley Hart imagines a Catholic father of 5 children and wonders how he can live without worrying about his children going to hell. Hart concludes that the imagined father does not really believe in hell, or at least does not really believe in the possibility of hell for his children. I still insist that most putative believers in an eternal hell do not really believe in it at all, but rather merely believe in their belief in it. This belief in belief is what we'll visit later. But before that, the article also references Roberto de la Noval, who recognizes that the fundamental question of secular antinatalist thought is at its core a religious one. Is our life in the final analysis truly a gift? So after all these thinkers and their theologies, what does Kevin West, the author of this paper, think about bringing a new life into this world? What he says seems mental gymnastics to me, at least for now. It could be because I don't really understand what he's saying. He rejects Christian exclusivism, so he thinks that no one will be sent to hell. He takes that belief in belief argument and combines it with the gift of life. I believe that children are a gift. I believe that life is a gift. I try to believe that. I believe that I believe that. I believe in life as a gift because I believe it has been given.
Well, I can't believe the stuff that is not I can't believe it's not butter is not I can't believe it's not butter. And I can't believe that both I can't believe it's not butter and the stuff that I can't believe is not I can't believe it's not butter are both in fact not butter. And I believe they both might be butter.
Now, I don't mean to caricature Kevin because he is serious about this. That's why he concludes, if an eternal hell is a proper good or a necessary means by which to produce a sufficient good, then so be it. But I admit that I have great difficulty conceiving such, especially given the idea that more might end up lost than saved. If it would have been better for any individual not to have been born, then the soteriological problem of evil obtains. If it would have been better for many not to have been born, then creation as such becomes a questionable enterprise. This problem of hell was also evaluated by Bruce Blackshaw in his paper Applying Pascal's Wager to Procreation. If possible future children might suffer eternal conscious torment, the expected moral value of procreation is extremely negative. This implies that theists have a moral obligation not to procreate, which for most theists entails a moral obligation to be celibate or to undergo sterilization surgery. If you want to know the details of this paper, please check this episode of ATW, where we covered most of the nuances in Bruce's arguments as well as his confusing conclusion. All that was in August 2024. A new paper responding to Blackshaw's argument, a critique of Blackshaw's ethical argument against procreation, was published in Iranian Journal of Medical Ethics and History of Medicine by Amir Rastin Torogi, who teaches at the University of Mashhad, Iran. Looking at the abstract, Amir criticizes Bruce on 3 points. One is Bruce's conclusion that theists should not have children and so should either be celibate or get sterilized is implausible. 2, the asymmetry of procreation is questionable. And 3 is the incompatibility with the theological foundations, particularly within the Islamic tradition. I don't have access to the full paper. I even tried to register to the journal but still could not access it. So if you happen to have it, please let me know. Antinatalist Handbook's Persian version was published. So now Antinatalist Handbook is available in 19 different languages. All of this is because of hard work of Lawrence and so many translators and proofreaders. So thanks to all of them. There's also news about Antinatalist Advocacy Conference that is happening on 29th and 30th of November. The conference will be live streamed on YouTube and links for both days are out. I'll include both links in the description. Make sure to bookmark them and click on that notify me button if you haven't already. Speaking of the conference, they will also be doing a fundraiser for MSI Reproduction Choices, which is a global organization providing personalized contraception and safe abortion services to women and girls. The good news is they have received 30% of their initial goal of £500 even before the week of conference. So the goal is now revised to £750, and on top of this, they have managed to find a private donor who will match the donations, including those collected so far. That means if we meet the goal, then MSI Reproductive Choices will get a total of £1,500, which will be a fantastic demonstration of antinatalists doing good. So if you haven't already, please hit that give now button with whatever small amount you can. Every little helps. Also, one point to note is since 29th and 30th November are on Saturday and Sunday, there won't be an ATW on regular Sunday time. I might do it midweek or cover everything in a subsequent week depending on my work schedule. Conundrum made a video talking about an argument against antinatalism. If a couple decides not to have children, that does not guarantee that there will be fewer people in the future. Maybe their decision inspires someone else to have yet another child instead. On a collective level, a drop in population may reduce stress on resources, which can motivate people to have more children. And since people will be having children anyway, the more important question is whose children will be born and what kind of children will be born. If the number of people in future is not going to change, then should we at least not act such that whoever those future people would be better than the alternative. Therefore, if we think that we have better chance of having and raising a child to make a good human, then we should, and this is a strong argument against antinatalism. Conundrum considers some objections to this argument and rejects them. To know what those are and why he rejects them, watch his video titled Whose Children? The No Difference Argument Against Antinatalism. A similar but far too simplistic argument was presented by a channel called Think It Ankit. This is a Hindi video. Ankit says that people who accept antinatalism are critical thinkers or smart in his view. As a result, these smart and compassionate people will eventually die out and the world will go towards what he calls stupidity. Lawrence was at Hyde Park at the Speaker's Corner in London talking to people about not having kids. He has uploaded one such conversation. The person he is arguing with thinks that there are immaterial souls and they are benefited by being brought here. We give them opportunity for them to experience suffering and learn lessons from that suffering. Speaking of Lawrence, he also made another episode in his Antinatalism Around the World series, this time talking to Ayella from Uganda. Uganda is still a conservative country with very high fertility rates, and Ayella, who himself has a son, is an antinatalist and has seen through all the pronatalist fallacies. They talk about religion in Uganda, Catholicism and its effect on Ugandan notions about procreation, even Buddhism. Ayella tells that if he was religious, he would have been a Buddhist. They also talk about situation in African countries in general and also on aspects of family planning and sterilization. World Vasectomy Day is celebrated in November each year by the organization with the same name, World Vasectomy Day. Coincidentally, it was 14th November this year, same day as Children's Day in India. But the good news is that World Vasectomy Day organization is partnering with MSI Reproductive Choices to provide this choice to men across the world. MSI and World Vasectomy Day launched a bold new partnership this year to educate men about this method and expand access to services in Zambia and Uganda. We are shifting norms to champion men's contraceptive responsibility, expanding choice for men and couples, and embedding vasectomy into health systems to enable sustainable access in the long term. In just 6 months across 2 different countries, 750 men have chosen to have vasectomies, and we expect this will grow significantly over the next 3.5 years of the project. And those were some of the stories about antinatalism this week. Thanks for watching and see you next time.